This episode is sponsored by Property Filter. Find great deals faster.
Hello and welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. This podcast is designed by real people on their journey to achieving financial freedom, and we'll focus on people who've either already attained it, who are joining us on that journey, or maybe a specialist topic that can help you build your technical knowledge to achieving and maintaining that financial freedom. We hope you enjoy it. Hi folks, and welcome back to the Financial Freedom Podcast. Today on the show, we're going to be talking through one of our technical topics, and it's a good one today because it's about all things joint venturing in property, or more importantly, joint venturing in property and hopefully doing it right. So as always with our technical episodes, I've got my co-host and business partner, Tim here. Hi, Tim.
Hello. Thanks for having me again.
Joint ventures. That's what we're going to be talking about. So,
sounds good.
Do you want to define what a joint venture in your mind is? And then we'll I'm not throwing you a curveball if it's not one of the questions. Would you want to define a joint venture in your mind? And then we'll talk about the successes and failures.
So I think specifically what we're going to talk about is, say buying property, whether to, say sell or keep. So you're partnering with someone else for that property purchase, to jointly own that property.
Yeah. So in some way you are jointly both beneficial interest in that, aren't you?
Yeah.
Technically.
Yeah, some sort of beneficiary or interest together. So it doesn't mean that it has to be like 50-50, depending on what each person's bringing to the party or what you agree. It could be 50-50, it could be 75-25, whatever, like any sort of percentage, but you've got that joint shared interest in that property.
Lovely. So obviously we hear it a lot as well, don't we? Which is I see people putting it out on the social media sometimes, which when we go through this, hopefully this is going to deter people from doing that, going, I'm looking for a joint venture partner.
Yeah.
And it makes my toes curl a little bit. So so why don't you, to build some authority, why don't you, question one, let's talk about how many joint venture projects you've been involved with, how many joint venture partners you have, and the success rate.
Right. So I think to kick it off, I would just say I'm an advocate of joint venturing because, I built quite a good portfolio. I built businesses with other partners and things like that. And generally, it's been really, really successful. So to define your questions, I'd say of my own personal property portfolio, I've probably done over 30 types of deals or projects all up. So let's say 35, something like that. Most have been to keep, some have been to sell as flips for profit, and I'd say about 85% of those have been with joint venture partners. So quite a decent percentage. Some of them is just me and my wife. I don't class that as a joint venture because that's just
don't tell her. Silent.
It's a partnership, but that's just our ones that we directly keep without any sort of other partner. So quite a few there.
So how many? So that's the projects.
Yeah.
How many? Different partners, things like that? Do you think?
So I think at the moment of stuff that I'm keeping, I've got maybe probably like four or something like that we keep. Properties and with joint venture partners at the moment for the long term.
Yeah, and that's individual, so it might be different percentages and so on and so forth, ownership. So do you know how many people are involved?
Yeah, so we've got even some businesses where different properties, we've got some extra joint venture partners that come in as well. So there's probably, you may be talking 6 or 7 people that, that you're owning property with.
We've set up some new terms in this week as well. So
or maybe 8 actually of people that we're connected joint venture with that have a certain percentage of either all the properties or some properties in the business. So different structures at different times and all those sort of things. So a few partners there.
Yeah, and so successes, most of them, I would say.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk about some of that and why is it being successful? Why do you think, talk about why did you joint venture in the first place?
Yeah, so I think pretty much all of them, all the ones that I'm keeping are successful. I had one development project that has been sold now that probably was the least successful of them for a few reasons, but all the other ones I think we've got really good relationship with the people I work with. I mean, obviously you can ask them and you could talk about it a bit more, but, and it's been beneficial because I've been able to do more. I've been able to do more projects, build a bigger portfolio, and all those sort of things than I would have been able to, on my own. I think that's the key. So I think the reason I joint venture is because 50% of something is much better than 100% of nothing, basically. Yeah. And in simple terms, it's, to make more money and, to help other people make more money as well is the reason why you do it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you mentioned one that didn't go so well, and you said there's a few reasons. Do you want to pick on one or two of those? And you don't have to go into any great detail, but just into why you think if you
Yeah, so for that deal, it was purely joint venture, just because I was in the area and I could look after the project, and he had the deal basically for no other reason.
right. So it's monetary.
No, so it wasn't. I think the issues for that were it wasn't personality or values related specifically, and there was a funding element missing of that package as well. So if you think for any property project, you will need funds, you will need expertise, knowledge, and time, and things like that. So if you think purely from that triangle, one of those elements was missing straight away. And then also, outside of that, I'm a strong advocate that the people you work with, there needs to be complementary but differing skill sets you can bring to the party. So, and a strong alignment for goals and things like that. So I think, that process was sort of missed in that regard. It just sort of went on with, and it was different to the other joint ventureships I got involved with. One of the reasons a few of my other joint ventures possibly are quite successful is because a few of them are from like our mastermind program where we met. And I think when you join that program, you got sort of similar goals or mindset in the first place because the sort of system you're going into. And then further that, you can spend a lot of time together throughout that 12-month process to get to know each other.
I guess if you used to look at it, if you took a joint venture as a product, as an example, you could say that the first thing in selling a product is timing.
Yeah.
Right. And then the second one is circumstance. The third one is leverage, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking at it where you've got your joint venture partners from that program, your timing is everybody's joined that program.
Yeah.
Your circumstances, everybody's trying to achieve pretty much the same thing. So then you're only really left with leverage, and then the leverage comes with the dynamics of each joint venture that you came up with. So I think the timing part there is the one that's
really important.
It's really worked. I think that's the really, really key one. If we to drill down into those mastermind based ones, and then other ones have been timing based on we've just been out in the market talking to people, right?
Yeah, sometimes for some of our projects we've had people come in that are certain funders, so they're joint ventures for certain projects to get equity share and things like that. So that probably comes down to timing and requirements that we needed and things like that. Yeah, and some of the people we've networked with, I've got to know. Some will be known for a while, but it just has worked well from that perspective.
All right, so let's move. That moves us on nicely to the second point, which is if you're going to do this, then you have to have a strong reason why. So, in your opinion, when or why should you joint venture, and when or why shouldn't you joint venture?
So simple. I touched on it before, but if it's going to help you make more money than you would otherwise, then that's when joint venturing works. In simple. So in the simplest form. So. One of someone we know, Shimon Rudich, will give him a bit of a plug, but he does a bit of a joint venture. MS Law, and a prominent investor himself and developer. So he does a talk about joint ventureship, and he's got a very
funny man.
He's a very funny man, but and he's got a very simple formula, which is 2 + 2 = 5. So if 2 + 2 = 4, then maybe you shouldn't joint venture. And I think what he means by that is basically, let's say you could buy 5 HMOs yourself. And get them done without a joint venture partner, compared to joining up with someone and buying 10, where you got 50-50 share each, the same property. There's probably no point joint venturing because you're getting the exact same result.
You've got 5 at the end of the day, haven't you?
Yeah. You both got 5 each in essence because you're 50% of 10. If with that partner you could get 11 or 12, you're better off. You've done more than you would have done otherwise. So that's a simple example of when you've got more properties, you're making more money.
Makes total sense. The 2 + 2 = 5 because it's the sum of the parts, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's if the sum of the parts don't equal more than they do as the sum of the parts, then you don't do it. So if the goal isn't increased by doing it, don't do it because it's not easy, is it?
No.
And so when shouldn't you? So it's the opposite, isn't it? So when you should is when 2 + 2 = 5. So what we're saying is when you shouldn't is 2 + 2 = 4 or less even. So if you are losing a bit or they are losing a bit, because what will happen is
if you don't work well together and you're not working efficiently and moving forward, like you've got a bad partnership, even if you're doing one together and you could do one yourself, like that deal might fall over. So you're actually worse off doing it as well. So that's where the collaboration makes sense.
And there's key here, isn't there? Because one of them is the sum of the parts needs to equal greater than the sum of the parts. But then, so 2 + 2 = 5. But then it's the person. So what type of person should you and or shouldn't you?
Yeah, so my perspective on this then for who you should team up with. So you don't want to be with someone that maybe is the same as you. Because a lot of people, even in business, go, I'll just join with my best mate. But all you'd be doing is drinking beers, high five, and just agreeing on everything. But you might not be getting the results that you could teaming up with someone different. You're too similar, you like each other too much or whatever. So that potentially is not a good relationship. Sometimes if you're completely different and your communication styles are the exact opposite, you might struggle to work together because you basically don't understand each other. So that could be a problem as well. The other thing is like maybe misalignment on like goals and vision and things like that. So like, you know, if you're quite a materialistic person, you want Ferraris or whatever, you know, fancy handbags and material goods, and the other partner, like, you know, that stuff doesn't really mean much to them.
Shared values is different than shared personalities, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's very, very different. And I think people get that wrong quite
Yeah.
often, because you might all want to be materialistic, but you also have the same skills base. I always refer back to to our friend who had a business with two other joint venture partners. And we use wealth dynamics, and they're all blazers. Yeah. You know, and it was so hard.
So they were kind of mates, really, weren't they?
They were mates that came together and were going to do something. And, you know, they set out with all the best of intentions, but it was so hard because they all wanted to do the same job in the business, right? And that is hard. Yeah,
if they're blazers, they want to be the ones going out talking to people and networking and whatever, whereas they need maybe a still to actually look at the numbers and get the systems in place and stuff like that.
Yeah, the one who was doing that part just got so annoyed all the time. And then the one who didn't do any of that was just the happiest man there. And like, there was just a problem.
Yeah, it's a very good example of how things, you know, can't work that well.
There's also a bit of a economic stress, isn't there, I think, in terms of what is the end goal and how quickly you're going to get there. So, because if you're saying to somebody, we're going to joint venture, and you're putting in the money and they're putting the time, you also have the responsibility to ensure that time isn't going to kill them from a financial point of view.
Yeah. So I've heard two examples, and I won't name names, but two examples of joint ventureships that haven't worked out. And both of those times, I believe one of the partners has gone in with the bulk of the money, and they've sort of had the agreement with the other that's doing all the time related stuff, is that until I get all of my money back, you basically don't earn anything. So the other partner, even though they might have a share in equity or whatever, they're not getting any cash flow from the property as an example. So they're not incentivized to keep using their time, and then it breaks down because they're the one doing all the work but not getting any benefit. So, you know, even though on paper you might go, I've negotiated a really good deal here, in fact it doesn't work out as well because, you know, you're not collaborating, working well together to push forward. It becomes detrimental.
Yeah, and that's you know, if the goal is too far in the future, then you've set it up for failure. You know, and you have to take responsibility for that as well. Because
challenges do happen as well. So like, and people get numbers wrong and things like that. So one of the partners might have said, "Oh, it's all right. It's an all money out deal." Yeah. You know, and then
and then you leave,
and then build costs go up, and the project gets delayed, and you know, markets change, and you can't buy plaster anymore because of pandemics and all those sort of things. And suddenly you've got 100 grand tied into it, and it's like, all right, that partner.
10 years of income.
Yeah.
After
10 years of income, basically, of that cash flow that's got to get paid back before you get anything. And then, you know, so that's something really to consider, is the fairness of that agreement, because sometimes investors overvalue the money, don't they? Especially on the outset, because they're like, oh, I really need the funds. I can't go ahead without it. But if you've got all the expertise and the time and all this sort of stuff, you know.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that I always come back to. And I talk to this to people all the time, which is, if you're putting in the deposit money, that's only 30%. If you're doing nothing else, that's not a 50-50. That's not 50-50.
Yeah, especially if you got personal guarantees and you're the director of the company and all this.
The other party's going to raise 2/3 of the money and do the work, and just because you happen to have the cash available, you think that's 50%, and it isn't. You know, because you're actually the smaller partner at that point. If you're funding the whole project, sure. You know, that's different because you're keeping the costs low, which means that your funds are going to come back probably a bit faster. And it's going to be easier to deliver the project and buy it in the first place.
The only other thing to consider is when you're starting to joint venture, you know, the terms might not be as good as you would think maybe on the first project, but it can lead to much better terms moving forward if you perform the role that you've agreed.
Absolutely.
Simple example, I've got some partners, and I think we've done maybe, you know, 5 or 6 deals or something together now. The first project, I did all the work all the time, most of the expertise. I still put in a certain amount of money. They put in more of the funds, but I still put in a certain amount. And that was just, I think that was sort of like their tester to see how it went as the first one. They had a lot more, you know, they had more funds that they could invest. They had other assets and all these sort of things. And I think they actually lent me a bit of money on another project, just a small amount, to see how that went. And then after those things went well, obviously the trust was built, the results were there. And then for every other project from then on, the split, they just said, well, we can fund it, you just do all the work, and and it splits that way. But sometimes you might just think for the first one it's a bit of a tester, but be conscious that it might lead to more. And it's the same with like private investment. Like I said before, sometimes someone might lend you like a 30 grand for a property deal because they don't know you as well. There's obviously risk involved. If you deliver and pay it back, suddenly go, I've got another 200 grand here that I want to lend out. I just wanted to see how this first one went. So sometimes you got to understand that when you get going.
Yeah. And I think you wrote it down as well, which is if you are just getting going, 50% of something better than 100% of nothing.
Yes.
So it might be that first joint venture is not in your favor as much, but as long as it leads to something great, or you have an agreement in place.
Yeah.
Or, you see it on Dragon's Den as well, places like that where you say, well, I'll give you this much, but once this is paid back, then it flips to this.
Yes.
You could always,
good example.
You could always, if you're paying somebody 100% of their money back, then there's no reason to give them more than 50% of the deal, ultimately.
And also sometimes with those initial projects, it builds experience and credibility, for what you're doing, and it leads to other things as well. So sometimes consider that.
Stop the podcast now. This episode is sponsored by Property Filter. Property Filter is the #1 property tool for today's property professional. It brings in all the data points and sources from all the property portals and auction sites into one convenient place. Then you have the option to overlay all the clever strategies found in the Property Filter blueprint to find motivated sellers faster. Now, we use it on a daily basis. It saves us over 80% of our time when looking for properties. And if that sounds like something that you want in your lives, please go to register.property-filter.co.uk/PPB, which is the discount code for this podcast. You will get 2 weeks free and a discount on your first month. That's it from me. Back to the podcast.
So there are slip, trips and falls with this, because a joint venture, you're choosing your joint venture partners for medium to long term here.
Yeah, if you're keeping property, it's like a relationship, isn't it?
So what are the things that can come up, and how do you mitigate that?
Yeah, I think it's been quite clear on what each person brings to the party. Yeah. So just because you're joint venturing and you're putting 20 hours a week into that business, it doesn't mean the other partner needs to, because the key, as long as you're getting results and doing what needs to be done, that's the key at the end of the day. So, sometimes people are bringing in more funds but less work and all those sort of things. You also, it's a trust thing, isn't it? You don't want a partner that's just looking over your shoulder all the time going, what are you actually doing, or blah, 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 and all those sort of things. And then it also comes down to...
That's a good point, actually. Sorry to interrupt, but it's like, if you're having to worry about the other person, something isn't right.
Yeah.
You shouldn't ever be in that position, because that other person, if they've got a problem, should be telling you what it is proactively.
Yeah.
Or you should be able to trust that everyone's moving in the same direction with the same intention. And things happen in life. Of course they do. People, everyone's up and down and that kind of stuff. It's life at the end of the day. But if you're having to really, like you said, look over your shoulder and check what the other person's doing, or have to chase them all the time, that's not okay.
Yeah. And I think it's also planning for the worst, or the divorce, before it happens as well.
Yeah.
Because we learned that a bit in Mastermind, didn't we? It's sort of like, if you're going into like how long do you intend to keep the properties that you're going for? And I think all my joint venture...
It's a hard question though, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? But like, if you took the HMOs as an example, all the partners I'm involved with basically said, look, if we could get 10 years of cash flow from a sale, then we consider selling it at any point. And then a lot of it was like, all right, as a minimum, we want to keep them for 10 years and then reassess at that point as like a general guide. So some of those things to know from the outside are quite good.
So just explain that to somebody. So just for us, the 10 years of cash flow from a sale, what do you mean?
All right, okay. So let's say, we'll try and use some simple math. So let's say you're going to make £10,000 a year in net cash flows, yours or the company share or whatever. So that's 10 years to get to 100 grand of cash flow. Yes, that's the 10-year rule. So if you would sell the property and make a profit of £110,000 like straight away, which is slightly more than that 10 years of cash flow profit, then you just sell the property, because it's like, I'm making good money of it now, and I could reuse that, put in something else or whatever. But it's worth considering at that point. That was a bit of a rule. I don't know how we came up with that.
Why does that apply to HMOs?
Well, it sort of comes back to what we said before, because a lot of those partnerships were like, as a minimum, we want to keep for 10 years. Yeah. So it's like, if we're going to keep it for 10 years and make the cash flow for that 10 years straight away, then we could just do that.
And for me, it's because that is a business, as well as a property.
Yeah.
It's a business because HMOs are a business, and you're providing a service as well as a product.
So you're probably putting a lot more work over the 10 years to get that 100 grand in cash flow. Whereas if you just sell it, you're done. You don't have the extra work associated.
Yeah, and 10 years profit. So, net profit. So, if you, like you said, if it's 10 grand and it's 100 grand, and then all your costs on the development to date and the cost of doing the sale is 100 grand or more in advance of what it would cost you to do everything, then why wouldn't you do that? Ultimately, because what we're trying to do, if you're doing your sort of like wealth hierarchy, is end up at the top of the chain with assets. And how do you buy those assets? Well, first, third thing is you pay for your life through your cash flow properties.
Yeah.
Then you make some profit, and you invest in that back into assets.
Yeah.
So if you can accelerate that journey by 7 to 10 years, then why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, exactly. So that's where that theory comes from.
How do you get clarity then? So obviously we've only talked there in terms of selling the asset, but there are other clarities that we will need during the joint venture process. So what else is there? Because it's not always going to be, we've been offered something that's 10 years.
Yeah. So your general roles and responsibilities and things like that. Your general roles and responsibilities, what the partner's doing, what they, the general day-to-day, who's going to look after what. So if you took ours initially, it's like, I think you were looking at raising funds, finding the deal. I was looking at like initially project managing and, managing the planning process and the build process, stuff like that. So simple things like that. You just know generally these are things that need to get done. How do we split those down? Obviously what share percentages are, how the fund management, the split's going to be managed and all those sort of things. So they're key things to look at. But I think the other thing, what it comes down to, just going back to your earlier point about the partnering, I think it just comes down to, because it's a partnership, it's like trust, isn't it? At the end of the day, if you're looking to joint venture with someone, how do you find out whether they're trustworthy? It's simple things like you got to talk to people that know them.
You got to spend time with them.
You got to spend time with them, get to know them, and also, if you can talk to people that they've worked with before, how do they deal with problems? How do they deal with challenges?
And that's
how did they deal with honest conversations? Because especially in the property world in this space,
stuff can go wrong.
Stuff goes wrong, and there's challenges that come up all the time. Yeah. So you just need a person that you can work with to collaborate on those things. That's really, really important.
Let's say you found somebody and you're thinking this would make a really good joint venture. What are the top tips that you could offer to that person or persons before they actually enter into it? What are the key things that they can do to triple check everything?
Yeah, so if you took like a bit of a due diligence process, like we slightly touched on there. So A, you want to get to know them. B, can you get references from other people? Ask for like an asset and liability list, things like that. Because it's partnership you're going into, you sort of need to understand that person, their background. What other companies have they got involved in? What other projects are they doing? What other businesses are they involved in? Things like that. And welcome the opportunity for someone else to do that to you as well.
It's a really good point, because that's going to actually then tell you their time commitment.
Yes.
Right. So I had one recently where, because we're quite prominent in the market, some people approach us for things like mentoring and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And somebody approached us and said, listen, I'm setting up a lettings agency and we really like your model. We'd really like to come up with an equity share for you. Can you give us an initial call and things like that? I was like, right. So I arranged the time and one of the two partners on the day couldn't attend.
Right.
On the day.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. I'm out.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is
simple values sort of check or something, is it?
They're not aligned.
Yeah.
Because the reason was, that they're on site. They've got site projects. Okay, but you've got a consultant lined up for a new business venture, and that person hasn't attended that meeting because they've got site projects. They knew that this call was happening, and they decided not to attend. So you're not aligned. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and what you can probably look at there is you may have had a conversation, and they may have thought it was a good idea, but in their heart, they're not in the same. They're not in. You have to, and it might take time for them to come to that decision as well, that they're in or they're not in. And you have to allow for that as well, because some two people make like snap decisions on these things, and those aren't good either. I mean, we took loads of time over certainly setting up the lettings agency part of the business. We had 100 conversations.
And you talk about tester, we sort of tested it out with like the initial project we did and how that went and how we worked together with that and a few other things. And then, that was a decent amount of time, and also being on the mastermind program to spend together. And then after, it's probably a good year and a half, 2 years before we started these businesses,
the trading business,
businesses. Yeah, so there's quite a bit of time involved in that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing though, because at that point, there was nothing that I could look at that would concern me. Do you know what I mean? Like, It was different skill sets, but there was nothing that I didn't like. It's like at that point where if you feel like you can ask somebody anything and they give you an honest answer, then you've got a good enough relationship that's it, right? And I think,
and if you can physically just communicate well together, obviously that shows a lot, doesn't it, in itself? If I think the one joint venture, which probably wasn't ideal that I mentioned before, if that person actually even like did that sort of check on me, because I had a lot of other projects on at the time. He goes, oh geez, he's got 12 projects on. He's really busy. How much time is he going to dedicate to this partnership that's just been brought to him? I sort of reluctantly took it on. I should have said no. I should have said no at the time and things like that. So
from what you've told me though, that you probably didn't even have a conversation long enough to explain he should do that to you. that one.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Vanished almost.
Yeah, exactly. So but they're the learnings, aren't they? So you know, success leaves clues, but the things that don't go well show you, why it doesn't go well.
If you try 10 times and one of them doesn't work.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, exactly.
It didn't work. It wasn't the end of the world. No one,
No, exactly right. But yeah, there's always something that you can look at as to why that was the case, as to help other people as well from that circumstance. Yes, I think the next one I'd say is, I think you touched on it before, but it's just that complementary skill sets and vision, I suppose, in a way. Because
three blazes in a room, isn't it?
Yeah, and the simple example there is what you're saying. So you're referring to Blaze, which is from a wealth dynamic profiling,
which is Genius U.
Genius U. Do that questionnaire and that report, the full detailed report, because in the report it actually tells you these are the sort of people that you could work well with because of your personality set. So that can help you just match up with people. And if you're in a group of people or you meet people, if they do that,
it also breaks down communication barriers, I find. That's the one thing I would.
And you understand the communication style of the others.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when somebody says to you, no, that's not right, and doesn't even say, hi, how you doing? You just go, yeah, that's because of their steel. You do that a lot. Show you the messages. Like, no. And I can hear it. I hear it in your mind, your accent in my head. So I'm like, no. You actually sound like Seb or.
Sometimes I do that, and then after that, I say, I hope you're having a good day.
Yeah. But no, because it breaks down that communication method as well, which I think is really key. Because if everybody understands how each other's communication style saves pain, in my mind, because there's nothing worse than trying to. What did he mean by that? Probably nothing. More times, you don't want to be second guessing your joint venture partners all the time. You just need to be able to go, it's just being a steal, or Phil's being a creator, he's come up with a concept. He hasn't given it any other thought than that. It's probably not going to work. It's just see if he brings it up 2 or 3 more times, I'll give it some of my time. So that kind of a thing, right? So,
yeah. Or sometimes understanding yourself's good, isn't it? Because sometimes as a steal, initially you go, no, that doesn't work. But it's not that it doesn't work completely. It's just the way that you've pictured it doesn't work. So you need to break it down and picture it the way that it could work.
Yeah,
sometimes
you're very good at that, actually. I have to say, like, sometimes you come up with something and then you ring me, or we have a Teams, or we meet up and we go through it and then we create it to make it work.
It
works, and that's great.
And that's collaboration with people as well. And that's the other thing we've we haven't really talked about much, but the property space especially is a bit lonely, and like just working with someone and collaborating and being able to like talk to them and like it helps ideas and push forward and all these it's just that general collaboration can push you a lot further forward. So you can't underestimate that as well, in my perspective, because
it was going through the mastermind program, and I think it was in like session 1 or session 2, and they're like, right, what you need to do for your HMO projects is you need systems. I was like, all right, great, systems, right, great. What does that mean? Nobody would tell me anything. That was it. It's like, you just need systems. So I was like, after about 2 or 3 sessions, like, I don't know what these systems are.
Wouldn't it be handy if someone wrote a book about like the systems?
Well, obviously we've just done that. So it's a bit of a plug for the book, Financial Freedom, the buy, develop, rent, refinance strategy. But the thing that I knew straight away was, well, I don't know what these systems are. So I was already in a position to look for somebody who could help me with that part. I could do deals and talk to people, but I couldn't what is the planning system? We've actually, you can listen to our podcast on planning, and it's good. If it's not
now you're an expert on it.
Now I've done loads of it. And that's the thing about working with like people like me who are creators. They try and learn the start and end. What does it look like at the end? Or what does it look like at the beginning? And learn everything they can about that. The middle bit,
steals are more
not great.
Steals are more in the middle and then push towards the ends.
I think you can have everything. I think you can have bits of everything. But you're specialist in certain areas, aren't you? I think that's the really critical.
Yeah, everyone's got their natural flow of personality, don't they? So Yeah, and then the other thing is the third one is just, will it help you make more money? It's
Yeah,
that. I think a lot of property investors are worried, especially in their first deal or second deal, going, oh, I don't want to give away half this deal. It's a good deal. But if you're not going to do the deal, you're going to lose out on it.
There's no deal then.
There's no deal. So you're 0%.
I think there's a level of commerciality behind it, though.
Yeah.
Right. So
there's a balance.
There's no point. I mean, like if you're doing something with hundreds of thousands of pounds that's going to pay you £250 a month after joint ventures and a joint venture, then you may as well have just bought that single let, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so and that's that 2 + 2 = 5 mentality. But there has to, I think there's a minimum threshold as well.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you're doing a property deal. So if you're doing a 5-bed ensuite HMO, you're going to come out with £1,000. To joint venture that and come up with 500, you know, it's a lot of money because you're in the £300,000 mark. It's a lot of money for that small.
So I suppose the tip there is understanding what you actually want to achieve as that partner. So simple one. Let's say you're a funder. I know some people that fund as joint venture partners. And they go, right, my goal is I just want 12% return on investment on my money with like minimal work. So that's the goal. And then if you're on the other side, you're not funding it. It's like, what sort of cash flow do I want to achieve from that project? If someone else is funding it, whatever, and breaking it down. So
and that's an expectation management process as well, I think, because sometimes people come up with a figure and it sounds sensible.
Yeah,
but it can be arbitrary. To make it work, I think we need to get to £5,000. We've got £2,500 each. All right, based on what though? Because to get to £5,000 net cash flow, it's a lot of units to be able to get to that. So if you're starting off with 100 grand between you, you're not going to get to £5 grand cash flow. You're just not on a net basis on that first deal. So you'd have to have loads of different position and building blocks and different roles and responsibilities. You have to raise more money. You have to. This person's going to have to do that. You know, these things are all going to be really critical to get into that zone. Whereas sometimes the expectation management isn't there, and then people set off in the wrong way. And it's like, oh, well,
and I think that comes down to understanding the goals, what they want to achieve, what you want to achieve. Yeah. Will it help you get there?
And it's a waste of time as well.
Yeah,
and you don't waste your time.
Yeah, don't waste your time. So
lovely, right? So will it help you make more money? 2 + 2 = 5. Yeah, and not everybody's compatible. That's a good summary. Lovely. All right then, Tim.
Thanks very much. Hopefully that helps our listeners. Anyone that needs to get a deal or joint venture with someone, then
you are a great joint venture partner as well, because you've got all your joint venture partners do say like you've got that forward movement mentality, which again is a really good trait to have. So
likewise,
I'm enjoying it.
And all the other partners. So
thanks very much for joining us once again on the Financial Freedom Podcast. Please make sure you take a moment to like, subscribe, and if you can, turn the notifications on to stay in touch with the podcast and help us grow. And until next time, bye for now.
Bye for now. See you on the next one.
Thank you once again for joining us on the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. If you want to get in touch with us about today's podcast or any of the learning topics that we've gone through today, you can email us at podcast@invest-prop.co.uk or get in touch with us with whichever your social media platform of choice is. If you think you would add value to us as a guest on this podcast, you can please get in touch and let us know what you would be able to talk to us about. Other than that, we wish you well on your financial freedom journeys. And once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.